So this crazy medical excursion that we've been on these last few videos spanned about 4 years or so. Constant travel, constant searching. When one night I stumbled upon what's called functional neurology. And the gentleman that I watched videos on, his name was Ted Carrick. He was doing great things with kids who had had concussions and brain injuries. Now, mind you, no one would ever tell me that that was what was wrong with Patrick, but my mom instinct kept saying, go back to the beginning, go back to the beginning. So he was seen by the Carrick Institute. We flew to Atlanta twice. We were also in Florida twice for week-long visits. And slowly we could see that while not great extremes, but slowly, small things, we were watching Patrick change. He could do analogies. His sentencing, his speech was so clear, but no balance, vision still gone, but cognitively, definitely on the mend. He was back in high school, working his way as a visually disabled student, and he was doing okay. So we kind of just laid low for a few years and let that transpire. What happened was he went to school, started for like a few hours to a half a day to a little beyond a half a day, taking regular educational classes to taking honors classes to eventually back to AP classes, passing them and getting AP credits. He graduated on time from high school with honors, but not without fighting. I'm a teacher by trade, and I'm very close with a lot of the teachers in our school district. But even despite writing a full IEP, attending meetings every year, you still have that one or two teachers that just don't get it because, okay, you're in a wheelchair, but you look normal and you talk normal and you're doing high-level education, so why should you be treated special? Because his head hurts every day, all day. That's why. Because he gets depleted in his energy level with the smallest of things. Because you were told that that's what you have to do. But unfortunately, sometimes a teacher or two decide they're not going to do what you're supposed to do. Enter the wrath of mom. They didn't much like me at my school some days. I'd walk in and our principal, he would just say, oh God, now what? Right? Kind of was a chuckle at some points. But as a parent, you have to do that. Thankfully, like I said, because I was a teacher and because I have friends that are teachers, I fought and knew my rights. Unfortunately, a lot of parents don't know that. And so I hope, if nothing else, if you're listening today and your kid is struggling, whether it's with an injury like mine or not, and you need help with your education, contact Impacted Inc. Let's see if we can walk you through the steps of what you can do. You have rights, and your kid has rights, and they're entitled to a good education. That being said, the fun story, right? Patrick's getting ready in Pennsylvania. You have to take the Keystone test to pass and graduate high school. Okay, give it to him. So his team puts together a request to the state for him to take the literature exam via either a computer or have someone read it to him, and then he answers the questions because obviously he can't physically read the test because he's legally blind. The state came back and said, well, he can have large font or Braille, to which our team said he can't read large font and he has just started to learn Braille, so that won't work either to read 11th grade literature. round and round we go, only for me to contact my state rep, who, between the two of us, called the State Department of Education, the governor's office, and the special ed office every single day until they finally called me back. Well, Mrs. Berton, we gave you options for your son. I said, he can't use those options. He said he can't read large font and he certainly can't read Braille. To which, and I quote, hold on, the man at the other end of the phone, who was the head of the special ed department of Pennsylvania, who was in charge of testing modifications, said to me, and I quote, Mrs. Berton, if your son cannot physically read this test in some way, shape, or form, I regret to inform you, he is illiterate. I almost went through the phone. If I could have strangled him from here, I would have. So, many phone calls later, we find out that the Department of Ed is going to come to our home school district for a meeting about my son. Now, my district was like, what did you do? Because we go to them, they never come to us. And I said, it's about time they do. It was at this meeting that it was discussed that, surely there's some way you can read this test. And they kept going around and round and round. And without it, I need to keep pointing out, without him taking and passing this test, he was not going to get to graduate. He was a 4.0 student taking AP classes, but he couldn't graduate if he didn't take this standardized test that they wouldn't give to him in a form he could do. Patrick slammed his fist on the table and he said to this gentleman with about 30 other people, you're not listening to what I'm telling you. He said, have you ever tried to walk through quicksand? And the gentleman arrogantly says, no, I've never seen quicksand. Patrick says, have you ever tried to wheel a chair through gravel? No, I'm not in a wheelchair. He said, well, I am, and I can tell you, it's nearly impossible. He said, right in front of me is gravel. You have laid down gravel. He said, but when I'm done with you, behind me is going to be a paved road for every kid to follow because you cannot do this to anybody else. So, that man's mouth was left hanging on the table and the state left and said, we'll get back to you. Their response was they would waive his requirements to taking the test as long as the superintendent would sign off on that he had fulfilled his requirements to graduate, which was not a question. However, it was a Band-Aid. We started a mess. I was on a trip to Florida and our state rep called and said, have you read the paper? No. He said the governor just put a stay on the requirements of using the state testing for a graduation requirement for 2 years. That led to them coming back and saying they're going to still require students to take the exams, but they're no longer used as a graduation requirement. So that's a little bit of a fix. And I think we kind of made a little bit of an impact. The testing is still the same. You are required supposedly to take it, but they can't hold you to it for a graduation. So I'll take it. Victory for Patrick.